So as you guys are probably aware, they did add these new Sage Mode reworks to Shindo Life, and I'm sure you guys are wondering what is the best one. We'll look no further in this video. We're about to find out. So remember to hit that like button, subscribe if you guys enjoyed this video, and let's get right into it, guys. Now coming in 7th place, I'm actually going to be doing this after the fact. That's why I said 6th place was the lowest, but no, 7th place, I'm actually going to be putting the Finite Strength Spirit. Now, this is actually for a very specific reason. I actually do think this is a type of Sage Mode in actual, Shindo Life, because it follows the same name format of the other Sage Modes. I also think that this will be getting a rework with the other Sage Modes, so I'm going to be including it just for that as well. This is honestly a really terrible mode in general. The Z-Spec doesn't really do that much damage. It used to double stack, so you could do like 100,000 damage on a low cooldown. That was nerfed, so now it's just generally a really bad mode in the game. It actually doesn't even give you that much stats as well. Alright, so I'm also going to be including the Sage Modes that haven't been reworked just because they probably won't be getting reworked. So coming in 6th place, which is the last place on the list, is going to be the Worm Sage Mode, aka Worm Spirit Awakened. Now, obviously, this is going to be in last place simply because they actually removed the ability to move stack with this mode. Once they removed the ability to move stack, where you could stack 2 modes together, it pretty much instantaneously made this mode kind of unusable. In general, I don't really see people using this that much anymore, just because since the M1s don't stack, the big giant factor of what made this mode so good doesn't really exist anymore. And I do actually think that even though the Z-Spec is quite good for, getting a couple more M1 combos off, in general, this mode is kind of just worthless nowadays. But I do actually think that as a standalone mode, it is fine. It isn't the worst in the game at all. It's just that, since it doesn't damage stack anymore, obviously it's not nearly as good as it used to be, but it still does, if you're not using a C-Spec mode, it still does have the extended M1s. You still have the big giant sucky ability you can use. So it's still an okay mode. It's just not nearly as good as it was before. Now coming in 5th place is going to be Mastered Rabbit Spirit. Now Mastered Rabbit Spirit is the Rabbit Sage mode in this game. Pretty much it was the old Frog Sage mode, but as a Mastered Rabbit. Now this mode is actually going to be above Worm Sage simply because that the Z-Spec of it is actually quite good. You can pretty much get an instantaneous like 100,000 free damage off the Z-Spec if you actually know how to land it properly. And it actually is combo extendable if you know how to, combo off knockback. Now, I actually do think the weakness of this is that the other Sage modes are definitely a lot better now in general because they actually do have super good utility-based things. And I do actually think that this mode will not be getting reworked probably ever, just because this type of Sage mode isn't really, one that needs to be reworked. And I actually do think that if they were to rework it, they'd probably make it a lot like the other ones. So maybe it's good as it is, but it doesn't mean that it's going to rank higher in this tier list. So I do think that it is a solid 5th place on this list. Now coming in 4th place as the, one of the newest reworks in the game is going to be Cobra Spirit. Now, the reason why I'm going to be ranking it this low is for a multitude of reasons, but it also isn't that bad. I just wanted to make that, aware to you guys. Now I'm going to be starting off with the Z-Spec. Now the Z-Spec, while it isn't the worst in the game, I definitely feel like the Z-Spec, it also isn't that great either. I do feel like the Z-Spec is mainly meant for just like getting free damage off on people. And I do actually think that if this mode didn't have the knockback M1s of the gigantic, snake summon and just made it so the Q summons the snake, but there's nothing to do with it. You have the base M1s not knock back. This mode would be insanely a lot better. Now, the reason for this is because the actual throwable of it is actually a really good combo extender. It's an instantaneous high damage throwable ability that allows you to extend your M1s. But the thing is, you can't extend your M1s because you have to use the weapon spec to use it. And the weapon spec summons the snake spirit, which will also knock them back. Now, talking about the weapon spec, it does actually summon the snake spirit. And then you get the normal M1s. There's nothing else to it other than that. And the powered up ability is honestly worse than the original throwable. So generally, for the actual powered up throwable, it's like a bruise stomp. That's the best way of explaining it. But the actual other throwable is better because it does more damage and also extends. So I do think Snake Summon is a really weird one. It definitely isn't that bad. It's still a really good mode, but it isn't nearly as good as the other Sage modes for a multitude of reasons. Also, another thing about Cobra Spirit, I actually feel like Cobra Spirit lost kind of its pizzazz because it used to actually be really good for traveling. It would have been good if they included, a whole traveling thing to it, but it really isn't that good for traveling anymore. And the stats are also, kind of meh. So when it comes to the Cobra, Spirit rework, I do think it is a very successful rework. It is a very cool mode. There's a lot of cool things to it. It just isn't the best rework that they've done, skill, like PvP wise and PvE wise. Now coming in 3rd place is going to be the Jeramaki Toad Spirit. Now Jeramaki Toad Sage Mode, I do actually think it's worse than Narmaki. I'll explain it more when I get to Narmaki, but the reason why this is going to be coming in 3rd is because it actually is a really good mode. Now there actually is a lot of competition with the Sage modes here, just because there's a lot of good ones, you know what I mean? So Jeramaki coming in 3rd place is actually a pretty big thing. Now the reason why it's going to rank lower than Narmaki is because I actually do think the Z spec is worse, the actual M1s are worse, and the weapon spec is worse. So if you guys aren't aware, the difference between them is that the Z spec is actually ranged and makes a bubble effect. Now, while that is actually extremely good, it isn't as good as having a combo extender, which Narmaki happens to have. I would also like to say that the throwable is the exact same. The throwable is actually a really cool ability where basically you put it down, it's like a secondary, version of you. And when you put it down, it actually charges up a bar on the right side of your screen, and it gives you mode based on how long you had it out. So practically, it literally gives you an extra mode. Like that's how good it is. I do think this is one of the, better throwables in the entire game, just because it literally gives you the point of having a whole extra mode. And I also do want to make it aware that the actual abilities of it are also quite good. I do think that is worse than Narmaki, but Jeremaki in general, I do think the M1s are fine. They make a bubble effect and all that stuff. And I actually do think that, the Z spec, while isn't the greatest in the game, and, the Q spec isn't the greatest in the game, it definitely could be a lot worse. I do think that the ranged M1s are definitely a huge factor into this being good as well. Now, more on the point of the throwable, this actually allows you to double stack modes a lot more effectively than you would otherwise, just because, usually when you double stack modes, your mode, you lose mode quite quickly. But with having this throwable, it basically gives you the ability to have your double mode up for a lot longer than you normally would. So I do actually think that the throwable of this is quite good. I do think it's a very good ability. I definitely think that, people are generally using the Toad Sages modes just because, overall, it's actually a good throwable. Now, coming to second place is going to be the Narmaki Toad Sage mode. Now, this one's going to be above Jeremaki Toad Sage for a very specific reason. The reason for this is going to be that the Z-Spec is actually combo extendable, which is actually a huge plus over, Jeremaki Toad Sage. I do think that that actually matters quite a bit. So when you factor in the fact that Jeremaki Toad Sage and Narmaki Toad Sage have just slightly different Z-Specs, one will obviously be ranked above another one, and it just so happens that Narmaki Toad Sage will be ranked above Jeremaki for the simple fact of I actually do think the M1s are better. I do think the Z-Spec is better. In general, I do think you should gravitate towards the Narmaki Toad Sage more because it has all of the good things about Jeremaki Toad Sage. All of the good things are involved with Narmaki Toad Sage as well. So I do think that, it takes all of the good stuff from Jeremaki and it takes all the bad stuff. It makes all the bad stuff better. So I think in the end, Narmaki Toad Sage definitely has a big advantage over Jeremaki just because the Z-Spec is infinitely better. I would also like to mention that Narmaki Toad Sage in general, I do actually think it looks better as well. I know that drip doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but if you want to be more drippy, I do think it actually is better. Also, the actual summon does function a little bit differently. Jeremaki summon, I do think is a little bit better, but just because it makes, bubbles and stuff like that. But I do think in the end of things, the Narmaki Toad Sage mode is a lot better. Bye-bye. By the way, guys, what is your favorite Sage mode in Shindo Life? If you're in the comments below, we'll be checking them out. Now, coming in first place as the single best Sage mode in the entire game is going to be the Slug Sage mode. Gary the Slug is super broken. I'm just going to be honest here. This is by far the single most broken mode they've ever introduced to the game. Yes, I'm saying it's better than Strange. Seriously. So on the fact of this mode being broken, I'll just go through and explain the abilities because it is actually the newest one. And, I do actually want to explain it a little bit further. So when it comes to the Snail Sage mode, the new reworked one, I do think the second mode is obviously better. The reworked mode is obviously infinitely better. But when it comes to this, first of all, the Z-Spec. Let's talk about the Z-Spec, guys. The Z-Spec summons a slug. It heals you. It's very basic. You're like, oh, wow, that's cool. That's really cool. That's a cool ability, stuff like that. And, it would be cool if it wasn't for the fact that the Z-Spec, when you have, when the bar, I'm pretty sure when the bar is actually full and you use the Z-Spec, it will instantly revive any teammate that is your squad that's down. It will give you mode back. It will give you chi back for a while. It will give you health back, and it will hit anyone like that is quite a while out of the range as well. So the Z-Spec itself is already overpowered, and we haven't even got onto the other abilities yet. Now, talking about the throwable ability is pretty much a pass. It's like the same as having a mentor passive, but on a mode. So the actual slug will make your healing faster. I'm pretty sure it gives you mode back. It also make your chi regen a lot faster, and it does actually stack with the chi regen of mentors. So you pretty much will have chi forever with this throwable. So I do think that these are really, really broken. And then let's get started on the weapon spec now. Now, the actual weapon spec will summon the actual spirit, so it will summon the spirit and actually does make your M1s no longer have the bubble effect and stuff like that, and the actual Slug Sage will make more bubbles, so it'll just be infinitely annoying for whoever you're fighting. But you guys may be thinking, oh, that doesn't sound good. You get a lot of healing, you get mode back, chi back, you can revive dead teammates. That seems pretty good, but that's not broken. Well, let me tell you something. If the person you first of all, I just want to say you could stack these. So if every single person in your squad is using the Slug Sage, you'll never die. It's pretty much as simple as that. You'll never die because they do actually stack. But that aside, pretty much why this is so broken is because you could have a single Slug Sage person in a 4-man squad, and it could pretty much almost infinitely keep everyone in your squad alive if they know even know somewhat on how to avoid damage. So if they know how to avoid damage at all, you can pretty much infinitely keep them alive. So you will be the single best, teammate in the entire world if you have Slug Sage and know how to use it properly, because you could revive them, you can give them all of their chi back, you can give them mode back. Yes, the one thing that pretty much makes everyone lose is the fact they run out of mode. Well, you'll give it them back, and then you also be healing them at the same time. And it's just, I feel like this mode is an extremely good mode. It's honestly broken. If they know how to use this mode properly, you probably will never actually kill them. I'm pretty much like, I do think that since the simple fact of it is that you could stack it, it definitely makes it a lot more broken than it should be. And I do think that this mode, while it is actually the best Sage mode of the game, is definitely one of the coolest Sage modes in the game. It may need a little fine tuning in the grand scheme of things. Anyways, guys, that's me for this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, remember to like, subscribe, hopefully see you next one, guys.